The boroughs are New York City. The burbs are everywhere else. Real estate is the ultimate game of risk and reward. It's the biggest investment most people ever make. Fortunes are made over a lifetime and lost in a day. And we're not playing with monopoly money. How do you stay ahead? Who's buying? Who's selling? And why? What do they know? We want the truth. You need an edge. Boroughs and Burbs is your secret weapon, giving you the insider knowledge and strategies you need to succeed in the high-stakes world of real estate. From Palm Beach to Palm Springs, Manhattan to Malibu, we press the experts to expose the pain, find the deals, and occasionally predict the future. That's Boroughs and Burbs, Thursdays, 3 o'clock Eastern, noon Pacific, because everyone can make money in real estate.
Welcome, everybody. Boroughs and Burbs, number 150. This week, we're talking about Connecticut icons. I am so excited. This has been, 4 years in the making, this show. About time we started talking about Connecticut icons, all three of which are right here in New Canaan. All right, let me pull up my screen and share. Let's see, to do my introductions. So today, it's Boroughs and Burbs 150, Connecticut Destination Gems, Adam Thatcher, Kirsten, Reoch, and Nancy Geary are going to be our guests. I'm your host, John Engel. You'll see there on the engelteam.com. You'll find Boroughs and Burbs on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio. And as you see, we've got 149 episodes in the can, and this is 150. This week, Adam Thatcher, CEO of Grace Farms Foods, and formerly, if I look down on his page, Director of Operations and Sustainability at Grace Farms. So he can talk to us not only about Grace Farms Foods, but Grace Farms, the destination. We love Grace Farms. They're a sponsor of this show for the last 4 years, and we're so glad to have the partnership. We have Kirsten Reoch, Executive Director of the Glass House, also in New Canaan. If you were impressed with Adam's 80 acres in New Canaan, you should be equally impressed with Kirsten's 40 acres in New Canaan, the Glass House, and you see the newly opened brick house in the foreground. Wait, somebody's trying to enter. Let me try it. And there's the famous Glass House. And Nancy, when you pull up Nancy Geary, you find that she is not only involved with New Canaan, but she's a best-selling author. She's got a fabulous career as a prosecutor and lawyer before that. But we're here to talk to her about the New Canaan Historical Society, which under her watch has been recently rebranded the New Canaan Museum and Historical Society. Got a big shot in the arm, building new buildings, renovating old buildings, renovating collections, doing so much. So I'm very excited to hear about all of that. So without any further ado, I'll stop sharing and say welcome. Welcome, Adam, Kirsten,
Thank you.
Nancy.
Thank you.
So glad to be talking about New Canaan after 4 years with my New York partner. I guess we should start with what unites us all, which is New Canaan. We are all happen to be in New Canaan, but it occurs to me that we're not only marketing and servicing the New Canaan community, that to varying degrees, we've got to look outside of New Canaan and appeal to a worldwide audience. Adam, can you talk to us a little bit about that? You've got a 80-acre campus, and you market to the whole world, and you're bringing in a Philharmonic, I think, next month. I mean, talk to us about the international reach of Grace Farms.
Yeah, sure. So, well, to start, Grace Farms is a cultural and humanitarian center that John mentioned is located on 80 acres at the north side of New Canaan. And the property used to be an equestrian property and was up for sale. The land trust wanted to try to save it. They weren't able to. It was getting ready to be developed into a number of residential lots. And a few people in the community came together and said, can we preserve this piece of land and give it back to the local and the global community as a cultural and humanitarian center that's free and open and welcoming to everyone. So Grace Farms is a place that hosts a wide variety of cultural programming, ranging from, as John just mentioned, concerts. We're hosting the London Philharmonic on October 21st as part of our 9th anniversary benefit. We've got incredible nature programming. This month is Butterfly Month, so we have all sorts of nature programming around butterfly bingo, et cetera. And then we've got just ongoing kids programming like Bunny Book Group. And so as a place that was really just built to welcome people in, our goal is to be really a hospitable place for the entire world, and hopefully just become a place that, you know, is an introduction to New Canaan, but so much more.
How much would you say, estimating off the top of your head, is local, lives within 5-10 miles of Grace Farms, and how much of the audience comes in from out of the area?
Yeah, great question. So I would say that midweek, I would say like 90% local. And then the weekend, it's maybe 80% out of town. So over the entire week, it's probably about 50-50. Certainly on the weekend, we are bringing a very diverse group of people coming from New York City, from Boston. We've had people who've traveled all the way from China just to specifically see this one property. We become a destination along with the Glass House, which you'll be getting to hear about in just a moment. We become a destination for design focused professionals, architecture files, who really just, these two destinations of Grace Farms and the Glass House become part of their bucket list. So, but at that same time too, right? I see little kids running around right now playing tag with their folks, and that's just kind of the casualness of a place like this, that we want everyone to come in and enjoy the space, because that's what it is. It's truly just a gift.
And how long has, last question before I move on to the Glass House, how long has Grace Farms been around?
So we are just about to celebrate our 9th anniversary. The story of Grace Farms really began back in 2007 when the property originally came up for sale. The design period, once the architect was chosen, which is a Tokyo-based architect by the name of Sana, and it's SANAA, which is an acronym. It stands for Sejima and Nishizawa and Associates. They're two Pritzker Prize winning architects. Yep, right there. And so the design phase was 2010 to 2013, and then build phase was about 2.5 years from early 2013 until we opened on October 9th, 2015, which was an incredible celebration. And we're now getting ready, even while we're about to celebrate our 9th anniversary, we're very excited to be celebrating a 10th anniversary, and we'll have a wide variety of programs coming out that we'll be announcing for next year.
Awesome. All right, that's a great segue to talking to the Glass House. Kirsten Reoch is the executive director. I think you're maybe the 3rd or 4th executive director since, well, why don't I let you tell the story? I mean, there's the beginning of the Glass House, but then there's the beginning of the Glass House as a public space. And I think they're both equally important to talk about. So take us from the beginning.
And it's important to talk about that this year because it's the 75th anniversary of the Glass House, which as a residence was completed in 1949 by architect Philip Johnson. It's an internationally significant modernist landmark that was really groundbreaking at that time. I mean, who had a glass all 4 sides house at that time in America? It was part of this influx of modernist, architects after the war to New Canaan, which was really unique in how there was such a rush of these architects out of Harvard and then Yale to build these really unique homes that make New Canaan very different from anything else around. So Philip Johnson started with 5 acres and expanded over time. We now have 49 acres with about 14 different structures or outdoor sculptures or follies and different things to visit across the site. It opened to the public in 2007. And we this year will welcome about 14,000 visitors in the year. Following what Adam was talking about, I would say we get about 10% foreign visitors, but about 70% of our visitors are from the tri-state area. So the majority are at least regional. But definitely, I think that we have a strong visitorship from countries that also have a strong history of modernist design. So from England and Japan and Australia, Mexico, Canada, and others like that. The glass house and all of the other buildings on site that were constructed 1949 to 1990 range in use. I mean, clearly, there's a sculpture gallery, there's a painting gallery, there's an architectural studio, there's a pavilion on the pond, and so there's many different things to see. And I think that visitors are often surprised. They come for that one iconic glass house, and then they discover there's so much more. And the collection of art, I think, often surprises people because Philip Johnson and his partner, David Whitney, they were both avid art collectors and friends to artists. So there's a lot to see when you come.
One question I have to say, and we'll get back to it, I guess. If I go to the Sistine Chapel, I expect to be one of 1,000 people in a very public space. And I think it's one of the things that you have to wrestle with. I have to say that when I go to the Glass House, there are very few people on the 40-acre campus at one time. I'm going to say less than 12 people on the site whenever I've been there. And it makes it a very different experience than going to the Louvre or going to the Sistine Chapel or going to any other, or even standing in front of the Seagram's building, 1957 in New York City. You're part of a crowd.
Yeah.
And I have to say, therefore, it's a very intimate space when I've gone to visit.
Yeah, and I think it's best seen that way. We run tours Thursday through Monday, April 15th to December 15th. All of our tours, whether you take the 1-hour tour or the 3-hour tour, you can experience it in small groups of about a dozen people. And so we take them out from downtown New Canaan, where we have a visitor center, to the site. And then you and an educator tour it at a really, I think, a gracious pace, and you experience domestic architecture, intimate spaces without being crowded. And that way you can take it all in. But it's also very important to understand it's not just buildings. This landscape was also iconic, and Philip Johnson was a landscape architect as well and a designer. And so, the buildings are meant to communicate with the landscape, and you're meant to take it all in. If you have to look through crowds to get to see this, that would be hard. So we only open it up for a large gathering maybe once a year. So in summer, we'll have our summer party in June, and you'll get that frolicking fun that Adam was saying with people, kids playing tag and people picnicking. But otherwise, really, you go in small groups, and that way people can ask their questions and really drill down in depth about art and architecture in the late 20th century.
And not just historically, right? You're not a museum to Philip Johnson. I would say that I think of your programming is very current. There's current artists, I guess, reflecting on the Philip Johnson and reflecting on modernism, generally speaking, and I guess trying to continue the conversation. Is that the best way to put it?
Yeah, it's meant to be a place to explore themes of architecture, landscape, and design, and not just a static picture back, but continuing forward. So we have rotating exhibits and installations, and that is part of how and why people come as repeat visitors. And so this year we have a visiting architect actually from Japan, Shigeru Ban, who mounted a small paper house. That these paper log houses that he's done in areas of natural and humanitarian disaster around the world. To us, it really spoke about like what is a building material, what makes a house, and how do small structures get used for housing for people, because they're all small houses across the whole landscape there. And in this year, we just did a restoration that we unveiled in April, the brick house, and we are really proud of that. But it had been closed for water damage since 2008. So we were able to reopen the guest house essentially of the original design of 1949 for the first time in over a decade. And so now we talk about, how do you build with glass? How do you build with brick? How do you build with paper logs? So I think that these visiting exhibits and designers and architects actually spark these conversations about design that you can then take with you as you leave as well.
Nancy Geary. We're gonna have some fun.
All right.
I've lived in New Canaan my whole life, and my conception of the New Canaan Historical Society was a place where you could go and do some research on your house or the history of New Canaan. And in the last, was it 5 years, 10 years, you have taken that model, turned it on its ear, and transformed it. Most notably, it's now the New Canaan Museum and Historical Society. And that was brought to my attention by our good friend Nick Yaniselli. So why don't you talk to us about the transformation? What is the Museum and Historical Society? And talk to us about how we got there, because it was a very sleepy organization under your predecessor, and you have given it a real shot in the arm. Talk to us about that.
Well, thanks for having me. First off, yeah, the New Canaan Historical Society was founded in 1889. So with Westport, it's the oldest historical society. And there was a time, especially maybe 70 years ago, where it was very robust, filled with hundreds of volunteers. And the primary thing that it did is it produced these annuals every year on various topics on New Canaan history that are still kind of the go-to references everywhere. If you want to learn about an industry, if you want to learn about an artist, if you want to learn about a shoemaker. When I was hired, we had almost no visitors and almost no volunteers. And there was a sense of what is the purpose of this organization. And for me, growing up in New York City, I just love museums. I think that museums where you can go and you can look at a few things and move on is just the magic of bringing culture to children, to everybody. And so I was really adamant that we use the existing collections and the historic house museums to be a museum where people can pop in and look at one thing. We one of the first people that came that just delighted me so much, he had come as a child and it had been so transformative for him that he was a professional reenactor. So I thought, okay, there is an opportunity to impact people in this space. We have a couple of incredibly important collections. Our clothing and textile collection is about 6,000 pieces. It's really the largest collection in Connecticut and has some incredible pieces. We also have a very important pewter collection. We have an important collection of the work of the Silvermine group of artists. So there were some things here that people didn't really know about, and it was an opportunity to draw people in by putting together exhibitions. And as many of you know, John's daughter is our clothing historian, and she not only has a wonderful curatorial eye and is a great collaborator and is willing to roll up her sleeves and do everything, but she also has a huge social media presence. And so when she did her first show, which was, it was called I Do, the History of Wedding Fashion and Tradition, and she looked through our wedding dresses and found wedding dresses from as early as the late 1700s to the 1960s. And she put together this incredible exhibition. It was this kind of aha moment of people coming in saying, I didn't know you had it there. Isn't this beautiful? One of the fun things was she was posting on social media, and this artist in Boston called me and said, I make sculpture out of wedding dresses. Would you like to have them for your exhibit? And she drove down and she set up her wedding dress sculpture on the lawn. So everybody driving by was instantly drawn to this exhibit. And yeah, John's showing you these dresses that are only a handful of what we have in our collection. I mean, this was probably about 1/10 of what we have. So that was kind of the beginning of this sense of how do we work with our collections and how do we work with our historic house museums to tell the story of New Canaan.
But like our other two guests, you're reaching way outside of New Canaan with a collection like the wedding dresses, and you're reaching an international audience, and you've got over 100,000 followers on Instagram, or no, TikTok, looking at these wedding dresses every single day. So by some measures, your audience is far more international than it is local.
And don't forget the modern, the mid-century modern tour in the fall ties in nicely to all of New Canaan. Nancy, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I think there's two things. The clothing and textiles has sort of taken on a life of its own, and there are people that are coming. You know, we had a group of road tripping young women from the Midwest who came out to see it. The Modern House Day Tour has been going on here. Well, it has been going on in New Canaan since 1949 with the first one, but the Historical Society resurrected it in 2000, and that is an opportunity to see the private homes in New Canaan. And we usually do between 4 and 6 private homes. It's a day-long event. It happens every other year. And that is a very international crowd for us. I would say at this point, most of the people that are buying tickets are not even from the tri-state area. Last time, 2023, we had a big presence from Canada. We've had people from Australia. We've had a lot of people from Europe. We've had architects especially seem to come from South America. So that is a different, I mean, one of the things that's tricky about the Historical Society, but also makes it interesting, is that our mission is very diverse. And so we have different parts of us that appeal to different people. And the architecture crew is definitely drawn to the house tour and October for Design.
I love this. I'm going to get to the question of how each of you defines success, because we could look at it as ticket sales or number of people who come to the property. That's how the library talks to the town council. They talk to us about how many people come through the door. That's one way to look at success. But I'm hearing each of you, if I talk to Adam about the mission of Grace Farms, it's very different. They don't charge admission over at Grace Farms. So, what is success at Grace Farms, and how is that different from the very intimate experience of the Glass House? And what is success over at the museum? Do any of you want to talk about what are the traditional ways that we look at success, but how each of you look at success and measure it? Because it seems to me that even volunteer involvement might be one of the most important ways each of you could be measuring your connection with the local community. Anyone?
Sure, I'm glad to jump in and keep the order. So yeah, Grace Farms is so untraditional that the idea of, right, KPIs, key performance indicators, is much different than certainly what you may be considering like as a for-profit business, or even the traditional nonprofit model, which a lot of that is, right, dollars raised or dollars given away, or those types of, you know, and as a cultural center, especially to your point, John, right, how many people come through the door. You know, we do have about 100,000 visitors or so a year, because we're free, right? And so we're open 6 days a week, and we host a lot of programs, so that brings quite a few people in. But we really don't think about it from that standpoint as really a humanitarian center. We think about it as how can we advance the work that we really are focused on, which is ending forced and child labor. How can we really create a paradigm shift in the way the work that is being done around the world to end forced labor and modern slavery, how that can actually be done. So we really talk about Grace Farms, for example. We talk about Grace Farms sitting at the intersection of architecture and justice. We uniquely are this hub that is bringing people together, a place that has just an ability to pull people in, inspire people. We talk about Grace Farms being a hopeful place. So when our founder and CEO, Sharon Prince, as she was not only building Grace Farms and then after Grace Farms, learning more and more around forced labor and realizing that building materials is one of the last really common denominators. After you've got food, you've got clothing, and now this concept of shelter, right? People aren't aware of their building materials and where they're coming from. So we've started this whole movement called Design for Freedom, which works with leading professionals across the architecture, construction, engineering industries, governments, international, quasi-governmental, governmental organizations like the United Nations. And so when you start to create this type of humanitarian work, it's not as simple as, you know, and sometimes we wish it was, but it's not, right? As simple as this many meals have been provided into the community, because we're creating really this new top-down major cultural shift in these important industries to end forced labor. So
it was Frank in the tea house who I think explained it very well to me. And I said, after, you know, I went and I found the tea house and he served me some tea, and I said, how much do I owe you? And he says, nothing. And he said, think about the business plan. He says, how many cups of tea, how many cheese sandwiches do I have to sell, you know, in order to what? He says, what I want from you, John, I want your involvement. I don't want your $5. I want your involvement, and I want your passion. And I thought, wow, that is a radically innovative business plan, where they don't want the $5. They want my involvement, and they want me to, you know, join the community. So really innovative business plan. And some portion, right? It's not even the 100,000 who come visit. It's some portion of them get passionate about the mission and can drive that mission worldwide and really make a difference, more so than selling tea and sandwiches.
absolutely. And you know we do have membership. While we are free and open to the public, we've got, I think now, 1,000 sustaining members that contribute every year, starting at a membership price of $75 up to $10,000. And we really look at that as a way where we're encouraging people to use their wherewithal to get involved in many different types of ways, whether it's a financial contribution, whether it's coming to programming and bringing your children so they're exposed to the arts, whether it's volunteering at one of our programs, or perhaps it's, you know, using your unique skill set that can help us further Design for Freedom to ending forced labor. It's a very porous, generative place where people can get involved in a number of different ways. So yeah, it's a special type of model that is unique. It's a very rare opportunity where you have a place that is so truly awe-inspiring, visionary, and generous at the same time. And when you have all of these things coming together, new magical outcomes just start happening. And that's what we've seen over the last 9 years. And it's not always measurable. And that's perhaps not important, right? Because quarterly earnings and reports are not relevant when you're trying to make the world a better place.
Love that. So let's talk about membership, Kirsten. I have to say that, there's one way is to sell a tour ticket, but you're limited to how many people can actually tour the property. And we've talked about it as an intimate experience. I have to say, I wanted more. So I joined your membership, and you called the Granger Society. And the Granger Society went toward another property a couple weeks ago, and it was called the Roundhouse. And I wrote about the Roundhouse and the tour because I was just so struck by the whole experience. And I wrote about it in the paper. And a gentleman said, I've got a great house. I would like to invite you and the Glass House Granger Society to come see my mid-century modern house. So it's just, what did you say, magical, Adam? It's magical, really, how in that little anecdote, how we've gone way past just what Philip Johnson's Glass House. You've created programming to involve people like me at a higher level in more places. We write about it, and it involves yet more people in the whole experience and starts the conversation.
Yeah, I think that education about the wider architectural richness of this area is deep in our mission. We're meant to be a catalyst, right? We're going to inspire curiosity about all of the other types of architecture you can encounter around here. And I think that is important. And membership, fundraising, ticket sales, all of that as a nonprofit, that is, kind of serving and subservient to achieving these important mission goals that we have. The Glass House, I should say, is a part of the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and getting out the true and deep stories about America, about Americans, about architecture, what it reflects of our society, how it evolves over time. All of these are important things to discuss. And so I would say that we measure our success on our interpretation and the outreach that we do to our guests, but also in our community. And I don't mean community New Canaan, though it can be, but it can be our region. It can be online to the people who are passionate about modernism or about architecture. And so I think that there's a wider community definition through that.
So I will say that there is something so unique about the New Canaan mid-century modern homeowners group community. Just your story of going to the Roundhouse and then somebody else says, come see my house. In 7 years here, I have seen so much enthusiasm of this group of people, and somebody buys a home and joins that community, and there's almost this sort of infectious energy between all of them. Success for us is partly that, but it's also, we're a little bit old-fashioned. Like, we need major gifts, we need membership, we need visitor entrance fees to support. We have 7 historic houses, and we have 3 that aren't even on the campus. But success for me is more when I feel like a story that we have told or something that somebody has seen has changed, perhaps in the slightest little way, the way that they look at their community, the way that they look at the world, the way that they look at themselves. And so for me, that's what I'm looking for when I bring people around and I talk to people about the work that we're doing is this going to have an impact on you in any way? Are you going to go home tonight and think about something that you learned? And maybe that makes something that you do tomorrow a little bit different. So personally, that's how I measure success. Obviously, my board wants major gifts and members, so we are definitely using some of the old indicators. Yes.
But your gala was sold out, and it was bigger than ever this year, and it was sold out faster than a Bruce Springsteen concert, right? I mean, let's brag a little here, right? That we're hitting new highs each year with the museum and historical.
I think that this year for the museum has been especially exciting because we opened the Jim and Dee Dee Bartlett Center for New Canaan History, which is the only permanent exhibition on the history of New Canaan. We are about to reopen the Rogers Studio, which, for those of you that don't know, was New Canaan's first landmark building, and the studio for the sculptor John Rogers. And we're building the Jim Box Special Collections Museum, which will open in the fall. And so there's a tremendous amount of enthusiasm because the campus is changing. And I think it's been, it's been the way it's been for a long time, and people are excited to see and to support making it a vibrant part of the culture of the town. So yeah, the party was fantastic. It was also fun. I mean, that's the thing about a benefit, is it has to be a fun evening, or you're not going to get anybody to want to come back the next year.
I also think, Nancy, you're underselling that exhibit, the Jim and Dee Dee Bartlett exhibit. That is something that's been so overdue. That was a huge thing that was lacking in the town of New Canaan, on a central place to go and find out about the history of New Canaan, and you guys just nailed it.
I'd like to add, I think that we all have a lot of commonalities, as John was saying. I mean, I think we all have a really fun gala. I've been to all, every organizations, but also, there's only 2 of these mid-century modernist houses that are open to the public, and Nancy's organization owns one of them, the Gorse Pavilion, which you can see, and then there's the Glass House. And I think it's been great then to add the Grace Farms. It's not a mid-century modernist house building, but it is certainly architecturally and design wise in conversation, or part of sort of a lineage that comes from that. And you guys had a talk with the glass producers there who echoed and said, the glass house was influential, and it is still influential. And so there's a dialogue between all of these that creates a really full story here in New Canaan.
I think of it as bookends. I think of Philip Johnson's very masculine square, glass space, and then I think of Adam's Grace Farms very curvy space, and I think, they're almost soulmates, 60 years apart. One all square and angles, and the other no angles at all just sinewy curves. Yeah, absolutely continuing the conversation. Talk to me about collaboration, since you brought it up and everybody's got galas. We do have, what is it called? October for Design in town, where we do begin to come together. Talk to me about how that, is it successful?
Well, I can start on that, and then Kirsten chime in. What happened, this was actually a program born out of the Tourism and Economic Development Advisory Committee, because there was a lot of conversation about how people were coming to New Canaan for the mid-century modern architecture and our Modern House Day Tour and the Glass House visit. But Elliot Noyes, the father of industrial design, was here. I mean, New Canaan has also been a design center historically forever. And so there was this conversation about how can it's not going to be Palm Springs Modernism Week, but it's going to be something bigger and collaborative and community oriented. And so the museum proposed October for Design, which was a way for everybody. There is a website that's octoberfordesign.org. Everybody to have programming and events and exhibitions and activities around art, architecture, and design in the community of New Canaan. And so we run the website. We all do. Sometimes we collaborate on the programs. Other times it's just the whole thing is a collaboration. So everybody's doing their own thing within that month. Some people sell tickets. A lot of the events are free. We've done some, Cole Akers at the Glass House and I collaborated on a speaker series as part of October for Design a couple of years ago. So there's definitely been overlap of the organizations too. And it's wonderful. I mean, there's so much more that October for Design could be, that I think that its possibilities are infinite, and it's still in its infancy stage because we're only year 4 and the first 2 years were kind of COVID.
Yeah.
Since we're
Yeah.
on October, I'm going to pull up October 21. What's going on October?
Don't we have not updated it yet. No, that's
no,
well,
this isn't you.
Oh, right, Grace Farms. Yeah, okay.
We'll get to you. We'll come back.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned at the beginning, we're really thrilled about the opportunity to be hosting the London Philharmonic Orchestra. It's the first time they've toured in the United States in 30 years. They'll be performing here just after their only other performance in the area at Carnegie Hall. And for us, as a relatively, small venue, we have a 700-seat amphitheater at the top of the river building called the Sanctuary, that it really provides a one-of-a-kind experience, intimacy for those people who appreciate the classical music genre, but also those people who are just looking for a one-of-a-lifetime experience. And so that's one of the things that I think is just so special about this entire community, is that you can look at the calendar of events around the year and they're sprinkled all over, right? This community is very, very endowed, I'll say the term, right, with just such a cultural history of wanting to bring people in through meaningful community events that is unlike really any other place. And I would say also really paying homage and respect to the historical significance of the town. There are other towns here in Fairfield County that have very, very impressive performance arts centers. And, I'm super excited for them. But there's something that New Canaan has maintained about its just true sort of what I think of as a authentic New England, Connecticut town, right? And so there's something special about that with these really amazing events happening all throughout the year. And when people are thinking about, tie it a little bit back to real estate, as people are thinking about where is the community that I want to invest in, ultimately, not only investing their money into a home, but also investing their child's education, and ultimately where they're going to spend the majority of their time.
Wait, are you trying to say that New Canaan's better than Darien, Greenwich, and Westport? Wait, I think I'm reading between the lines, and you're saying that the Glass House and the Museum and Historical Society and Grace Farms, we've got these things, and they don't have these things. And it makes I think that's what I'm hearing.
I will leave it at, I am very proud and excited about our choice to live in New Canaan and work in New Canaan.
Scott Hobbs, is he right? Talk to me about what these things do as a citizen of New Canaan for the last 3, 4, 5 generations. Does it matter? I mean, is this all just something going on in the background, or does it actually change the community, the existence of these world-class art and community conversations?
I think New Canaan's always had a really interesting group of residents, and a lot of them have been very inspired and dedicated to the town, and they put up an amazing amount of time, money, expertise, creating fantastic organizations. And I mean, you look toward Grace Farm, and again, it's a world-class organization that's changing the world. The Glass House was a gift that sort of started a movement here and became something very special that, we see, we kind of joke that we see a bunch of people dressed all in black wandering around town. And it's like, oh, it's architects coming out to see the Glass House. And we know that they're there, and there's a lot of them always. And it keeps us on the map and on people's ideas. I think for the Historical Society, it's just, again, it had become, we'll use the euphemism, extremely sleepy. And being able to, but it's in a very important part right in the middle of town. And now it's become kind of a congregation space. And again, the history of, unless somebody tends it, history disappears. So actually having that acting on tending to it and putting it forward and making it interesting and updating it is great. And John, with your daughter, again, being able to contribute in on the dress stuff. So John and I, our families, we potted together during COVID and did a bunch of hikes. And so, and our twins are both very, very, very close friends. And so just, we got to talk about a whole lot of stuff. And, again, seeing how you have we'll call them the younger generation, being able to actually reach back in time and create a real modern approach to something that who knew that there was 500,000 people actively interested in our dress and clothing collection that most people in New Canaan didn't even know was there. And so, I mean, it is a treasure and something special to have. And if we don't actively curate it, it just kind of disappears into the background. So I think it's great having these and some other stuff around New Canaan that just, it makes it a special place and fun place to be and lots to happen.
Speaking of community, I should say our newly restored brick house was done under the supervision and guidance of Hobbs Inc., a local contractor to work in a community to do a restoration of something that is important to all of us. Was great, and now it's starting to get that restoration is starting to be garnering awards. And so I think that this fall it'll show like just how wonderful that is. And if people listening to this have not come out, they think, oh, but I've seen the glass house. I would say that this is a great year to come out because there's so much that's new and opened that hadn't been visible before.
I'll say that for like the brick house in particular, being privileged now to do a whole bunch of the true modern and contemporary stuff that's out there, being able to see how it originated and where it started is both interesting and fun. And a neat part about the glass house and brick house was, again, how simple a lot of the construction is versus today. Whereas you go to Grace Farms and it's really cutting edge. I mean, it's very much out there and there's a lot of stuff that it's pushing the envelope on things. And so again, as John had mentioned, having the bookends. Now, of course, the Grace Farms grew a little bit from like the glass house. It's just a tiny bit bigger. For those who haven't been there, I'm being very sarcastic. It's much bigger. And just but in both cases, having them blend into the nature makes it just spectacular and they're wonderful places to be.
So in our last few minutes, we should talk about sort of the goals, forward looking. Are there any future plans or expansions in the works? And that could be either physical expansion or it could be programming expansion or further collaboration. I mean, where are the opportunities for all of you? And maybe it's looking inward and involving the community, or maybe it's continuing to look outward and getting our collections out through social media and other mechanisms to a broader audience to experience our treasures. What are the opportunities looking forward for any of you? No particular order. If you're inspired,
Sure,
to tell us your secrets.
I'll jump in again. So one of the most significant outcomes for us in the last few years was during COVID, when we couldn't be open to the public. We decided to launch a nonprofit-owned certified B Corp called Grace Farms Tea and Coffee. And it is a way for us to really go beyond the 80 acres site here and the 100,000 visitors that we have. John's got plenty of tea in his office. He gives it as gifts to new clients, really as a symbol of what can happen in a community. And so it's really exciting. We started this brand ultimately to invite everyone to experience Grace Farms, to demonstrate and educate ethical and sustainable supply chains, and ultimately give back 100% of the profits to supporting Design for Freedom, the work I spoke about earlier to end forced labor in the building materials supply chain. So we just launched into 26 Whole Foods in the North Atlantic region. Very excited. We've got a very quickly growing corporate food service program. We're providing the teas to JP Morgan, Bloomberg, World Economic Forum. And so for us, right, this is just incredible brand building, but also really we talk about it as this sort of reinventing philanthropic capitalism model, that anyone can participate in it. And, you know, not everybody is building a new building every day, let's be honest, right? But everyone is having a cup of coffee or tea every day. So this is a way to participate in that movement and this work, and just be part of giving back. So yeah, that's one of the most exciting things that we've got coming on.
I would say, I mean, we have a few different directions that we're looking to make improvements. There's always the physical. You know, maintenance of historic buildings is an ongoing, never-ending thing. So our next project is to restore the pavilion on the pond, which Johnson designed to, it sort of correlates to his design of the New York State Theater on Lincoln Center. It's kind of this beautiful white little gem sitting on our pond, but it's in bad condition. So we're looking for that restoration along with the pond. There you go. So it's not looking great in that picture. Hopefully it will soon. We're working for more energy efficient mechanical systems at the site, and humidity and temperature controls within the buildings that house the art. So those are physical things that we're working on now. And I would say programmatically, we're really looking to expand in the realm of education and class visits, which we have not historically done a large amount of, but I think that it's really important for younger audiences to be able to experience this, because I think that architecture is something that really sparks creativity and imagination. And this especially, where it looks like building blocks already, one can actually visit and then interpret what you saw through creative mediums. And so that's something we'd like to explore. And overall, we're updating our interpretive programs and tours. And I think that one should always do that, revisit it, update your scholarly sources, and make sure that you're being relevant to today's history and today's interpretive shared culture. And so we've had a lot of staff turnover in the last year. And so we have a new executive director, myself, a new director of development, and we will soon have a new director of interpretation and education. And I think that, John, you were saying I'm the fourth director here. And so I think each had a priority. I mean, at first it was just save it, stabilize it, open it to the public. And I think that it's good that it continues to change and to be updated as it moves forward into the future.
Wow. That's a lot going on. You got to fix the buildings, sell the tickets.
Oh yeah.
Teach the youth. Wow. All right. Nancy, you've got the most visible corner of New Canaan. You've got new construction going on a very visible corner of New Canaan. What's going on there, and how does that work with the future of the New Canaan Museum and Historic Society?
Yeah, we're very excited about it's a Jim Box Special Collections Museum, and it's our only contemporary building on the campus. It replaced our tool museum. The original Hanford Silliman House that was built in 1764 had a barn behind it. So this building is a nod to that. But the big glass wall that you see from Oak Ridge, it was designed because we are putting in an 1860 carriage that we rescued from the Stanford dump, that was manufactured by the Demarest Company in New York, which was sort of a preeminent carriage maker. John, you know about this carriage because it lived in pieces in your garage for quite a while till we could find someone to restore it. So that's going in. And the other part that I'm very excited about with that is that the back part of the building is going to be the original Addison Millar studio. He was one of the founders of the Silvermine group of artists. And the reason the studio is important is not only because of him, but it's made from the first cut of the tree barks. So it's a bark structure. And it was very common for people with very little means in New Canaan to build out of the first cuts because the mills didn't want them. So they threw all the stuff away. And so it was the architecture for artists. And it was the way that they could cobble something together. Yeah, that's the street side, but the back side, you can see that little brown piece to the left there. Yeah, that's the Millar studio. So that is arriving on Tuesday of next week. So that's going to be very exciting. And the building also will house an operational print shop with our late 1800s Hoe Acorn Press. So that building is going to allow us to do a kind of programming that we haven't had the opportunity to do. I would say the other couple of things that are my focuses coming up are we're digitizing our collections because not everybody can get to New Canaan, and we want to have the materials here be available for a wider reach. Yeah, there's the carriage. And also, I've been talking to the schools about getting kids in to do primary source research, because that's what we have here. And it's a really important part of research that most students are going on Wikipedia now to do. And so we're going to try and partner with the schools to bring them in and let them see these original documents. From the work that we're doing here, we also want to build on an exhibit that we did a few years ago that was called Forces of Change, Enslaved and Free Blacks in New Canaan. And it was the story of Black residents in New Canaan, starting with the enslaved people. And it made me realize how many different communities there were in New Canaan and how they've all come together to be what's current New Canaan. And so we definitely need to do some more research on the different communities that help make the town what it is today.
Wow, what a contemporary subject for a museum to be tackling. I mean, I think that's so exciting to say, what are people talking about? What's the buzz? Oh yeah, let's talk about, the Black experience in our town for the last 200 years. We've got the material and we've got the knowledge, and that's what people are asking about. So, wow, bravo. I mean, it's one thing to do wedding dresses. It's another thing to, dive in and tackle the contemporarily relevant subjects. When is that coming?
Well, the Enslaved and Free Black exhibit is down, and then we've made a book of it. So the book is here. I think our next group will probably be the Italian immigrant community. There was a huge community over by what's now the parking lot behind Town Hall. And it had a really, really interesting history. And many of those families are still in town. So I think that that's going to be our next critical research project.
Fun. Well, this has been really great. You have any parting words? I mean, I don't have a clever send off. I want to thank all of you for, you think about how you want to end, but about your closing remarks. But I want to thank all of you for coming. I mean, this has been a really tremendous show. We should have done this sooner. I should have each one of you back for a full hour and an in-depth dive, on the Museum and Historic Society, the Glass House, Grace Farms.
Maybe you can have the link to this show on some of their websites so that people can hear more about it in a interesting, different way.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so excited about, for instance, October for Design. I'm excited about the Philharmonic coming. It occurs to me that a lot of these events are going to be sold out. I know that your Modern House Tour is sold out well in advance every year. So these are really hot events, hot tickets. And so I'd encourage anybody watching this show to get online right now before you forget and either book tour tickets, Philharmonic tickets, or October for Design, or send a note to the Glass House people saying, if you're not selling tickets to it yet, put me on your list for next year. So thank you all. Adam, closing remarks.
Yeah, well, to try to bring it a little bit back to real estate, I think one of the one of your first questions was about how we measure success. And I think that one of the things that really stands out to me in the last 9 years that I've been with Grace Farms, or a little bit more than that, but since we opened, is we had somebody who had recently moved in right next door to Grace Farms, and we asked them, welcome to the community. We brought them over some, coffee and tea and some vegetables from the garden or whatever. And they said, the reason we chose this house was so we could be right next to Grace Farms. And we said, like, wow, like that is beyond what we really thought we could, why people would make a decision like that. And so,
oh, I can see that. In fact, I've met other people who've also moved here after drinking some tea in the tea house with Frank or eating your cheese sandwiches. Yep, absolutely. I've seen that happen.
So,
it's
as
real.
simple as a great cheese sandwich and a great cup of tea.
Real. Kirsten?
I just moved here a year ago, and I am continually surprised when I meet new Canaanites who say, "Oh, I live on Ponus Ridge Road, or I live on Frogtown, and I've never been to the Glass House." And I want to just appeal to all your listeners to say, this is part of what makes New Canaan so special. And if you're not coming to visit us or the Grace Farms or the Historical Society, this is it. This is the time to do it. Get out. Please come visit. And I think that you'll be really pleased, and hopefully come back with guests as they come to visit.
Nancy?
I just want to say that I have been to both the Glass House and Grace Farms, and I feel like I live here on the campus at 1300 Oak Ridge. So I would urge everybody to go everywhere. I think the thing that strikes me about New Canaan is people seem endlessly curious. And that's what makes working here in the kind of work that we do so rewarding, is that you have this audience that just loves knowledge, loves experience. And I'm very happy to be part of that community.
When I asked my mother, as a teenager, why do we live in New Canaan? She really did point to the people. And she says, there's plenty of places with nice views, plenty of places with nice weather, California, Florida. I'm here for the people. I'm here for the kind of people who are engaged in that Grace Farms conversation, the Glass House conversation, Historical Society, who are innately curious about their history, art, architecture, and doing something with a higher purpose in the world, Grace Farms, and continuing the conversation, Glass House. So she said that's why they picked New Canaan so many generations ago, and that's why they stayed. So thank you for all you do. It's why we're here in the first place, and it's why we stay, right, Scott Hobbs? Right, Meredith? All right. Thank you.
Thank you,
Till
John.
next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well.
Bottoms up.